the shark, Le Cost Killer, Mr. Fix-It, all pointed to one man, Carlos Ghosn, a man who became a legend for two very different reasons. On one side, he was the man who saved not one, but two global car giants from the brink of collapse. This made him a corporate rock star and even a comic book hero in Japan with thousands of fans. But then, he was arrested. The same man the world celebrated as a genius was accused of secretly funneling millions behind closed doors. And just when it seemed like the story was over, he vanished. What happened next became one of the most unbelievable escape stories ever recorded. Carlos Ghosn was born on March the 9th, 1954 in Brazil. As a kid, he frequently fell sick due to the climate. So his family moved back to their home country, Lebanon. His father ran an import-export business, and his mother stayed home with the kids. Carlos lived a comfortable life. They had a driver, a nice house by the Beirut coast, and vacations at his grandmother's house, big enough for the whole family to roll in. However, everything changed when his father was arrested for murder. You see, he had partnered with a childhood friend to smuggle diamonds and gold into Lebanon, but he grew suspicious of being cheated. So he hired a local tough guy to scare him. But things went terribly wrong. A dispute broke, tension grew, and a shot was fired. In his father's absence, Carlos studied in a private school. Unfortunately, he was kicked out for constantly getting into fights with other kids. Still, he was brilliant and later got into one of the top schools in France, École Polytechnique. So at 20 years old, Ghosn was finally where he belonged, and he was determined to make the most out of it. In the late 1900s, École Polytechnique still worked like a military school.
Précédent, l'école polytechnique est située à Palaiseau. Voyez, c'est la coiffe.
Top students usually joined the French government, but Ghosn wasn't interested in a safe paycheck. He wanted to go into business and make big money. So after Polytechnic, he studied economics at another major French school. Then he started hunting for opportunities. For months, nothing came up, until one morning, the phone rang. A man named Hidalgo said,
"We have a project in Brazil. We'll buy you a ticket. Come anytime."
Hidalgo worked for Michelin, the tire company, and they needed hungry young engineers to expand in Brazil. At first, Ghosn thought it was a joke, but when he realized it was real, he jumped on the offer instantly. Once at Michelin, Ghosn was sent straight to the company's factories. His job was simple: slice rubber, put it into molds, and roll it up. After 3 years of pure hustle, he became one of the youngest factory managers in Michelin history. Then he got his first big mission: make Michelin Brazil profitable. Back then, Michelin was losing to a rival in farm tires, so Ghosn made a bold move. He dropped farm tires completely and focused on passenger tires instead. It was a risky bet, but it paid off. Sales quickly skyrocketed and the Brazilian unit was back in the green. Soon after, he was sent to the US to merge Michelin with Uniroyal Goodrich, a deal so big that if it failed, Michelin would crash. When Ghosn took over, he discovered that 6 of the 7 Goodrich factories were worthless. So he shuts plants down and cuts jobs everywhere. Little did he know, he had just declared war on the company's unions. Refusing to negotiate, they threatened his representative, sending bullets in his mail and bullying his family. But Ghosn didn't flinch. He cracked down harder by issuing a closure notice. Soon after, the plant resumed production with 1/3 fewer workers. That's where he earned his first nickname, the Shark. Some admired him, others hated him, but everyone knew one thing. Carlos Ghosn could fix any company, no matter the cost. However, Carlos was hungry to climb even higher, so he made a choice that would change the course of his life. Thanks to his success, Ghosn started hanging around top CEOs. That's when he realized something that annoyed him. Other bosses in the auto industry were making triple his salary, and after 20 years at Michelin, he still wasn't going to run the company. So when he was given the option to join the French carmaker Renault, Ghosn jumped on the opportunity. Francois Michelin felt betrayed, furious even, but Ghosn didn't care. He wanted the bigger stage. When he joined Renault as number 2, the company was in debt and under government assistance. Ghosn went on an aggressive cost-cutting campaign. He closed the factory, handpicked junior staff to spot out wasteful spending, and shuffled staff from one department to the other. Suddenly, salespeople worked at factories, engineers went after finance, and within a year, Renault saved almost $22 billion in today's money and finally turned profitable. But this was just the beginning. Renault's CEO at the time always dreamt of expanding beyond France. Now that Renault had built up a pile of cash, it was time to figure who to acquire. Eventually, he zeroed in on the Japanese car maker Nissan. Nissan was in serious trouble. The company was bleeding cash and buried in debt. The truth is, Nissan was more focused on building cars its engineers found interesting rather than what an average consumer wanted. In fact, things were so bad that elevators were shut down at the headquarters just to save electricity. Nissan initially tried to get a bailout from Daimler Chrysler, but when the deal failed, they agreed to a partnership with Renault instead of a full takeover. Ghosn was put in charge and flew to Japan. From here, his life went into overdrive. When Ghosn reached Japan, the welcoming was cold. To many, he was a foreigner coming to run one of Japan's biggest companies, a direct hit to national pride. But Ghosn didn't care much. As he took over, he pulled the same brutal playbook that built his career: close factories, slash jobs, and crush spending. As seen earlier, this approach had often caused chaos and strikes. However, Ghosn was in for a shock. Instead of pushing back, Nissan workers stepped up. They worked 3 times faster to hit goals. In engineering, all 15,000 employees stopped their projects for a month just to hunt down cost waste. A scene he had never seen in France. And it paid off. Within a year, Nissan went from losing money to posting a $2.7 billion profit, shocking the automobile industry. Ghosn became a superstar overnight. He appeared on talk shows and press conferences with journalists hanging on his every word. He had a 1960s hit song remixed just for him, became a comic book hero, and had thousands of fans begging for a photo wherever he went. Back in France, Ghosn was just another employee. However, in Japan, he was an icon. But as he enjoyed his newfound celebrity, Renault's CEO showed concerns. The company's management secretly wanted to take over Nissan and feared Ghosn wasn't focusing on his mission. Then came the turning point. On April 29, 2005, Ghosn took over Renault as its new CEO. Little did he know that this would mark the beginning of endless troubles. Hey guys, thank you for watching the video so far. Before we dive into the next chapter, take a quick moment to punch that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. I have even crazier stories in the works, and I would love to share them with you. I really appreciate your support. Now let's get back to the story. At this point, Ghosn was both the CEO of Nissan and Renault. He would work a week in Japan, then the other in France. But a dark pattern began to emerge. At Nissan, Ghosn was razor sharp and knew the details of every project. But back at Renault, he rarely showed up even for important meetings. And honestly, he had quite the incentive. You see, Ghosn made a little more than $14 million a year at Nissan, 4 times more than what he made at Renault. And for a while, things seemed to move smoothly. That was until the 2008 financial crisis broke.
Red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Nissan had refused to pay him in dollars, so they paid him in yen, a currency famous for frequently bouncing in value. To protect the dollar value of his income, he signed a swap deal using his Nissan stock as collateral. But then the crisis smashed the dollar. Ghosn took a $20 million hit. To cover the loss, he secretly borrowed money from 2 Saudi billionaires who sold Nissan cars. In exchange, he granted favorable payment terms and handed out special bonuses. But the problems kept coming. In 2010, Japan ordered companies to reveal the salaries of any executive earning over $1 million. So imagine the outrage if people discovered Ghosn was making 14 times that while the economy was burning. He panicked, slashed his salary, and only declared $9.6 million. Still, the public was enraged, both in Japan and France. But Ghosn was not going to let go of all the sweet cash. With help from his closest collaborators, he bought properties in Brazil and Lebanon and set up a fat consulting fee to be paid after his retirement. Meanwhile, his personal life was falling apart. He was going through a divorce, Renault wanted him gone, and people inside Nissan started to openly turn against him. Ghosn was losing control of everything, and the crash was going to be brutal. The French government owned a big chunk of Renault, and they were done with Ghosn dragging his feet. They gave him 2 choices: lose his job at Renault or push faster for a full merger with Nissan. Ghosn picked the merger, but the second that news leaked, Japan freaked out. He had always protected Nissan from a merger with the French, but suddenly his loyalty seemed to have shifted. If nothing was done, Nissan would be doomed. So 3 Nissan executives, Hari Nada, Hitoshi Kawaguchi, and Hidetoshi Imazu, started a secret investigation into Ghosn with 2 objectives: get as much dirt as possible and take him out. For months, they traced all transactions related to Ghosn. They found out Ghosn used an internal Nissan fund to buy homes he lived in for free. But that alone wasn't enough to destroy him. They still didn't know how Ghosn planned to get the rest of his undeclared earnings. That is where Hari Nada comes in. Nada was head of legal and next in line as head of the CEO office, a position which gave him unfiltered access to Ghosn's schemes, the perfect insider. Then came the information they were looking for. Ghosn's right hand, Greg Kelly, had finally cracked the formula for Ghosn's post-retirement payout: dirt cheap Nissan shares. Nissan would grant shares for Ghosn to purchase for around 1 yen each. Then he would have pocketed the difference when their value grew from the merger. That was the missing piece, and as soon as Nada got wind of this, he took it straight to the authorities. Now, the only question was, how do you trap the most powerful man in Japan's auto industry? They had to make him show up. Ghosn had not yet purchased the homes owned by Nissan. Nada told him he had to sign the deal in person. So on November the 19th, 2019, at 3:41 p.m., Ghosn's private jet landed at Haneda Airport. But for the first time in 20 years, customs stopped him. Minutes later, he was arrested and thrown straight into a cell. Eventually, Greg Kelly was grabbed the same day at another airport and shipped to the same prison. Just like that, Carlos Ghosn went from global business icon to Japan's most famous criminal. When news of Ghosn's arrest hit the media, Renault exploded with anger. Nissan had just blown up their long-planned merger. The two companies, once partners, were now at each other's throats. Renault tried to fight back by attempting a merger with Fiat Chrysler, a big deal to make it strong enough to swallow Nissan later. But Nissan played hardball and threatened to quit the alliance entirely, so the deal failed. To calm the chaos, both companies cleaned houses. Ghosn was fired along with every executive who worked with him. Meanwhile, after almost 4 months behind bars, Ghosn finally got bail and walked out of the Tokyo detention center. But that freedom didn't last. A month later, he was arrested again, this time for allegedly defrauding Nissan. Luckily, he was granted bail on 2 conditions. His movements would be monitored and communication with his wife, Carol, cut. Ghosn was at the mercy of Japanese authorities. Plus, his family had reached out to the French government and powerful friends for help. But they received the silent treatment. So Carol made a decision. If the law wouldn't free him, she would. She got in contact with Michael Taylor, a former US Special Ops who specialized in extracting hostages. Taylor assembled a small team: his son, Peter, his friend, Zayek, and himself. Together, they set up a plan to smuggle Ghosn out of Japan. His lawyers secretly passed messages during prison visits, and after months of preparation, the operation began. On December the 27th, 2019, Taylor and Zayek landed in Kansai International Airport with 2 huge black boxes. Since they claimed they were attending a concert, customs figured the cases must contain music instruments. From the airport, they checked into a hotel and waited. The next day, Ghosn took his daughter out for lunch, said goodbye, and slipped over to meet Peter at his hotel. They were soon joined by Taylor and Zayek. Taylor didn't want his son to be seen as an accomplice, so Peter left them and took a flight to China. The remaining 3 returned to their first hotel. Once there, Ghosn climbed into one of the giant boxes, breathing holes drilled in so he wouldn't suffocate. To avoid customs check, they booked a private jet. All cases were carefully loaded in the jet, and they took off for Turkey, then Lebanon. Ghosn was finally out. When the news broke out, the world was shocked. Ghosn had just pulled off one of the craziest escapes ever. Japanese authorities lost it. At their request, Interpol issued a red notice. This meant that Ghosn and his wife could be detained and sent to Japan if they ever left Lebanon. Meanwhile, Greg Kelly was left holding the bag, forced to face accusations alone. Ghosn was technically safe in Beirut, but life was far from smooth. He was blacklisted by major banks like HSBC and JP Morgan. Harvard cancelled the program he was supposed to participate in. Also, he couldn't even move around freely. Beirut was plagued by protests over runaway inflation, poverty, and corruption. In the space of 14 months, Carlos Ghosn had gone from the top of the business world to locked in a Tokyo cell, then a world-famous fugitive hiding in his homeland. He tried to clear his name in the media.
No, just if possible, one or two, and try to answer, and then we're going to move around.
In Japan.
I'm going to fight because I have to clear my name, and this is something which is extremely important to me.
But honestly, the damage had already been done. But as Carlos Ghosn was being torn apart in the world press in 2019, that same year, a secret face recognition firm called Clearview AI had just been exposed, and the story of how it rose to power is insane. So click here to watch it, and I will see you there. Cheers.